This is the second video in a three-part series featuring the Down system. So if you haven't watched the first video yet, check it out over here. As mentioned, this is something new that I'm going to be trying out, and we'll see how it works. Welcome to Multi-Loving Model, the channel that shows you how to handle multiple interests, relationships, and approaches to finance. My name is Gerald, and I help people to figure out their way through life, love, and learning in order to customize their own happiness. Today on Wealthy Winning Wednesday, we're going to continue the discussion on the Down system and how it pertains to your particular personal finance. So in the last video, I introduced you to the concept of the DOWN, or desires, obsessions, wants, and needs. And I basically went into a little bit more detail on how to actually distinguish them. And eventually, by the end of the video, we actually came up with this particular format for what priority these things should be. If you're not sure what's going on, go check out that video and then come back right here. I'll still be waiting here. So if you're here, I presume that you've already watched the previous video. So welcome back to this video, and I hope this video will find you well. For the first one, I want to actually talk about obsessions, which is, like I mentioned in the previous video, the most critical component that you have to get rid of first. So let's talk about obsessions right now. So like I mentioned in the previous video, obsessions are something that you may not necessarily have full control over, whether it be for gambling or whether it is for drugs or whether it's video games, pornography or whatsoever. If you have an addiction, if you have an obsession over something, generally speaking, you're not in full control of what you can do with it, and therefore you require the help of other people. And using these same principles, I want to bring across the idea that obsessions are something that you need to recruit other people for. Have you ever tried telling somebody who was addicted to anything to stop doing what it was that they were addicted to? Whether it be smoking cigarettes, drinking, video games, pornography, gambling, or whatever it is. Have you ever tried that? Doesn't go very well, does it? The reason is because obsession is primarily driven by the dopamine system, which means that your brain is constantly anticipating a new reward every single time it engages in that behavior. And especially because it is risky, it doesn't always pan out, the hit is especially great when the person who is addicted actually gets the hit. And it is, in my opinion, that it is not possible for such a person to be able to rationally decide for themselves and by themselves how to get out of this obsession. This is where I think the best use of financial agents, life coaches, and whatsoever are able to best come in, because these are the people who are necessary to actually focus the person and get them to really reconsider their lives, whether they want to take control of their lives or whether they want to give in to their impulses. So for example, if let's say you were a gambler, right? You love to gamble, you like going to the casinos, you like loving to spend the money, you like going to the blackjack table, the roulette, the pinballs, the slot machines, and things like that, right? So let's say you loved going to the casinos. Would you be willing to concede that most people lose money at the casinos? Honestly, yes. You might be able to concede. But the reasoning is that you will be different, that I will be different. I have a system, I have a method, I have a way of getting the money. And because we constantly focus on what we actually do get versus what we lose in the case of obsessions, what happens is that we tend to over-exaggerate what it is that we do win, and we tend to undermine what it is that we do lose, thus leading to an inflated sense that we are actually winning when we're actually not. And so in these particular cases, if somebody else were to come and tell us, hey, you know, this is not really working out for you, it's not really going to work because the message contradicts what we tell ourselves. So instead, what needs to happen is that an external party needs to come in and they need to get all that information. They need to track every single game that I play, how much I actually won, how much I actually lost, and present all that factual data to my face in order for me to recognize that, hey, this is a problem. And even so, I may not quit as a gambler because the pull is just too strong. And that is why this other person is critical. The role of this other person, other than to help this person to see that this is a problem, is to also set this person aside, take this person out of this environment, and to go and talk to this person to try to find out what it is that they want to accomplish in their lives. So there's two aspects to this. Number one, this external third party has to show that this is a problem. Number two, they have to be able to identify where the person wants to go. And then the third part of it is to point out how, if they do not take control of their lives, they are going to continue down a bad end. Those are the three things that this third party has to cover. Only once the person is able to acknowledge number 1, number 2, and number 3, and the third party is able to get all this information, then the path towards healing from obsession can actually proceed. This third party has to be able to sit down with this person and discuss a financial plan that makes sense for them, that will enable them to not only turn the obsession into a want, but also to be able to reduce as much of the expenses into this treatment of the obsession. The primary thing about obsessions is this. While you are obsessed, what you are chasing is more of a dream, an illusion, if you will. So if you are chasing the wrong illusion, if you are chasing a mirage, what you'll end up getting is frustration, because you can never achieve that illusion. So for a gambler, the illusion is that you are winning money. The reality is you might very well be bleeding money out of the seams, but because you occasionally, very occasionally want a very huge sum of money, you forget that you are constantly bleeding very small amounts of money very consistently. Your chasing of the illusion ends up destroying you, and possibly other relationships as well. And that's why obsessions are really critical to tackle as quickly as possible, but always with the help of other people. Next, let's talk about wants. So wants are things that you might want to have as little time commitment for and as much happiness for, right? So the best time to happiness ratio, if you will. This also applies in terms of finances, right? You want to ultimately get as much happiness as you can for as low a value as possible. That's the first aspect of it. The other thing that you want to consider about your wants is that because your wants should only be gotten by yourself, only if you need that happiness boost, what you want to do is to set aside a small sum of money that will enable you to fulfill many of these wants. In the meantime, you can also accept the presents from other people which fulfill your wants. So why is this so? Well, let's put it this way. If you do not have a certain set of money that is saved up to splurge on your wants as needed, what will happen is there will come a time in your life when there's so many things just crushing you, really, really bad, you're going through a really bad patch in your life, and you don't have any outlets for happiness. You can't necessarily rely on other people to give you that need, to help you with your happiness. You have to take care of it yourself, and at this point your want becomes a need, and with any need you have to actually spend it. Now I will cover need in a little while, but I want to talk specifically about wants. In order for you to make sure that you are adequately provided for in terms of your happiness, you have to set aside that money in order to buy that happiness. On the other hand, you don't want it to be such a huge sum that you are tempted to just spend it as and when. You want it to be a small amount that allows you to accomplish many of the little activities that allow you to get that big happiness boost while you find the money to try to boost up your happiness. So this small sum of money really is just an interim. It is just a small buffer for you when you are critically down, to quickly get a quick, fast injection of your happiness in order to keep maintaining your living. And then, while you continue to live, you will want to quickly infuse the money back and to boost back your happiness to its original level. It may take time, and that's why this is not a fixed sum. But generally, I would say you could use 1 month of income at most to have that really, really quick fix that will allow you to move on with your life. That's what I would personally recommend. So wants are excellent if you want to give them as gifts, because they are the things that you don't necessarily need, you don't really want, you're not really budgeting that much of, and therefore if it comes to really elaborate things like, for example, birthday parties, Christmas gifts, and things like that, it is good to actually find out what the other person wants and then gift it to them instead. They get a boost of happiness, you get a little bit of happiness because of compersion, and you see them happy and therefore you are happy, and everybody wins overall. So wants are great if you are getting them for other people. Again, make sure that the cost to value ratio is also okay for yourself. So now let's talk about needs. So I mentioned just now that wants can actually turn into needs, especially when it comes to times of distress. And then it becomes the same kind of concept as a need. However, the difference here is that needs can be predicted and they can be allocated for. However, wants are not as predictable, and therefore you only set aside a small sum of money in order that when you need it, it is an expense that's already accounted for, ready to be used. How do you budget for needs? Now, take into consideration that needs ultimately reduce your misery baseline, and therefore it is imperative for you to just spend whatever it is that you have to spend on in order to reduce that misery. With that said, it is possible to spend so much that you are gaining no returns from it. You are gaining marginal returns from it, at which point you should really stop. Now, how do you tell when you are getting marginal returns from spending on your needs? Here is when I think it is marginally useless for you to continue spending on your needs. And technically, it is the exact same principle that you're using for every single one of these categories. Ultimately, you want to find what has the greatest value for the least cost. The cost to benefit ratio should be as much in your favor as possible. So what do I mean by this? So for example, let's say you have to have an operation for your kidney stones. I don't know how you got kidney stones. Maybe you're a taxi driver who's been driving for a long time. But either way, the kidney stones are causing you distress. As a need, you have to get them out. Suppose there are two surgeries. One costs $50,000 and the other costs $20,000. First and foremost, you may say the $20,000 one may be the better one because it's cheaper. Well, perhaps. So you have to look into the different factors. What makes the $50,000 one a superior option to the $20,000 one? And what does the $20,000 option have that the $50,000 does not? So now you're weighing the costs and the benefits in order to come up with an idea of which one is the better value for you. And then once you've gotten the value, then you look at the price and you decide which one actually feels right for you. And if you're having trouble with deciding which one actually feels right, try this exercise. Take a coin, one side is heads, one side is tails. If you flip a heads, you make a promise to yourself that you will take the first option, whichever option that is, right? So select that. Maybe that's a $50,000 one. And then for the flip side, for the tail side, you promise yourself that you will go for the $20,000 operation. Only after you have weighed all the pros and cons and you're still not very sure, then what you do is you do this. Next, what you do is you take that coin, you flip it in the air, and then when you flip it, you catch it and keep it hidden. First question to ask yourself, when the coin was in the air, which one did you hope that it would land on? And which one did you hope that it would not land on? You would probably have one of these answers, maybe not both, but maybe one of these answers. Or if you haven't got an idea, then now you open it and you take a look. And remember, you promised that you would take that option. So look at that. If you flipped the heads, which is a $50,000 surgery, you say to yourself, all right, I'm going for the $50,000 surgery. If you flip the tails, you tell yourself, all right, I'm going to take the $20,000 surgery. And then at this point, pause and analyze your emotions. Analyze your state right now. Are you feeling positive about your decision? Are you feeling neutral? Or are you feeling negative about your decision? If you have made this choice, but your gut feeling is still telling you this does not feel right, go with the other option and don't think about it anymore. If what you have chosen is neutral or positive, go with that. That is the way that I generally use to break ties in case I'm faced with two options which are very similar to each other in terms of value, in terms of the cost to value ratio. So once again, for your needs, you want to determine which one has the best cost to value ratio and you also want to make sure that it is all budgeted for. For all the bills that you have to pay, for all the things that you need to pay, you want to make these as automatic, as pain-free as possible, as little thinking as possible, as mentioned in the previous video. The other thing that you also want to take note of is you want to try to reduce your needs. So what do I mean by that? So for example, let's say I need 100 gigabytes of data every month because I'm watching so much YouTube, like this video. I'm just kidding, don't stop watching my videos, please. But if I'm using 100 gigabytes of data a month, other people would say, you know, that's kind of excessive, and you might be inclined to agree. So in which case, your need for watching 100 gigabytes of YouTube videos every month should be reduced to something that is more manageable, that is more accessible. And that is another principle that underlines all your needs. You want to reduce your needs to as little as possible so that you are not spending a vast amount of your resources on them. This is the entire concept of minimalism in that sense. By reducing the amount that you need, you reduce the amount that you need to spend. And by reducing the amount that you need to spend, you save more. And by saving more, you can be financially retired earlier. And finally, the last thing about needs that I would want to point out is that you should be responsible for your own needs rather than to outsource it to other people. I've mentioned it, and I'm not going to cover it in this video. This will be coming out for Friday's video instead. But these are the 4 principles for your needs. So number 1, you want them to have the best cost to value ratio as possible. Number 2, you want them to be as automated, as pain-free as possible. The third one is you want to minimize your needs as much as you can. And the last one is you want to be responsible for your own needs. Now let's look at desires, which is the most complicated part. So as mentioned in the previous video, desires are things that are really important because they raise your baseline of happiness permanently. However, even with that said, it doesn't mean that you should spend indiscriminately in order to raise this baseline. There are also limits. So the first rule of thumb is, of course, you have to find what is the best cost to value ratio. It applies to every single one of these elements. It's the same thing for your desires. The best cost to value ratio. If you could have a renovation done for 3/4 of the price of another one, you'd want to take that, especially if everything else is the same. Or to put it more concretely, let's say you have 2 renovation options that are exactly the same in terms of the add-ons, right? One costs 40,000, another costs 30,000. Obviously, you want to go for the one which costs 30,000 rather than 40,000 because it's exactly the same. Even if there are a few extra bells and whistles, if you don't need them, disregard them and then see what you can really get out of that value. The next thing about desires that I want to point out is that this is something that you can actually share with other people. It means that it is possible for you to give, and it's also possible for you to receive from other people. If this is the case, I would personally recommend that if you are giving to other people, again, look at what it is that is acceptable for you within your cost to value ratio, and then you give that instead. Now, when it comes to receiving, on the other hand, it is a little bit different. While it is good for you to receive your desires from other people, you may not actually be comfortable receiving it. So let's talk about the scenario in which you are comfortable receiving it first. So if you are comfortable to receive, then receive. But if you are not comfortable to receive, then there are 2 rules that I use to determine whether or not I should accept these gifts. The first rule is this: if the other person were to back out from giving you the gift, would you be comfortable to pay for it? So if, for example, if somebody were to treat me to, let's say, a dinner, and it cost me $50, if I am not comfortable to pay $50 for my dinner, then I should not accept. That's the first rule. However, if, let's say, the dinner cost $20 and I were still comfortable to pay that amount, then I should accept the offer because I'm willing to pay for it. So there is no loss even if the other person were to back down or they forget their wallet or whatsoever. There is not a lot of grievance there. The second rule is this: if the amount is so exorbitant that I'm not comfortable accepting it, but the other person insists that I receive it, then the other rule that I follow is, if I accept this, I have to pass this on. So what does it mean by to pass it on? So let's say a person were to gift me $5,000 in cash just because. I can't gift myself $5,000. I have no way of doing that. I can't gift $5,000 to anybody in my life. And therefore, I would not be comfortable accepting. However, if that person kept insisting that, you have to take this $5,000 because whatever reason, right? And eventually, I've had to receive the money for whatever reason. My mindset is this: now that I've received the $5,000, if in future this scenario were to happen and I were the one with $5,000, I have to be ready to give exactly that as well. I have to be ready and willing to do what has been done to me to another person. In this case, it is passing the favor on. So with this concept, I have accepted a few things previously, like certain kinds of dinners, certain kinds of gifts that I know I did not deserve, that I know that I did not really earn them and whatsoever, but because of other people's goodwill, I received it, and therefore it is my duty in that sense to also pass that favor on to another person, and so making sure that the cycle is complete. And so with that said, desires are good if you want to fulfill them yourself. However, if other people are fulfilling it for you, you can use whatever it is that I just mentioned to decide whether or not you want to accept that help that the other person is providing. And so these are the 4 categories. So for your needs, these are all the things that you want to take note of, right? And then after that, your desires, you want to take note of these particular things. For your wants, you want to take note of these. And for your obsessions, you want to take note of these. And so using the system, this is your basis for your expenses. This has nothing to do with your income, but this is about your expenses. And I will cover about expenses in another video for Wednesdays. But in the meantime, this will have to do. Stand by for Friday. So what do you think of this system? Do you agree with what I've said? Do you disagree? Do you have other definitions? Do you have other ways of looking at it? Let me know down in the comments section below. If you know somebody for whom this video would be helpful, consider sharing this video to them. It'll make me happy that I'll be able to help out another person as well. If you'd like more content about how to handle multiple interests, relationships, and approaches to finance, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. My name is Gerald, and this is Multi-Loving Model. Be happy in diversity. Cheers.